Hey, thank you for tuning in to this episode of ArcLighter. This particular episode is the most important curve in architecture. The most important curve in architecture is not revenue versus projections or expenses. It's not profitability. It's definitely not this. The most important curve in architecture absolutely has to do with labor projection versus labor actual. We're going to go through why that's important, but essentially, we have to understand one of the largest pieces of our expenses, almost in any business, but definitely in architecture, which is our people. And so, yes, we have rent, yes, we have leases on space, and we have insurance and all that kind of lovely stuff. But how we project the usage of our people, the fees that our people bring in, and the work we do is really important to kind of understanding how your business is going to thrive, or if you need to pick up some more marketing and more projects. So let's get to it. So essentially, the most important curve in architecture, as I was talking about in a minute, is labor projected. It's not necessarily the most fun thing to talk about. Hello. Not the most important thing to talk about or fun thing. Versus, I'll say, labor actual. And what the heck do I mean? So architecture is a business where, and I tell people this a lot, architecture is a business where we're sort of a debit system. And in a debit system, you may have fees that are so many dollars, and over time, you dwindle away those dollars by every time someone uses an hour gets taken away. So ultimately, you may start out with let's say you start out with $100 or $100,000. Every time a staff person uses an hour of time toward that project, it gets debited from your overall. And so your starting money, and then you have your ending money, let's say, which would be zero, and hopefully you finish the project and everybody's happy. So we like to say that if you end up spending more money than you've made, you essentially pay for the privilege of working on that project, which is not a great position to be in. The second thing you have to know about labor projection versus labor actual, well, actually, let's go back. Let's compare that to, let's say, an accountant or an attorney. An accountant or attorney might be, let's say, $400 per hour, and they're happy to work for you forever because every time they tick off an hour, they send you a bill for $400, and it goes forever. So while we are a debit system that kind of drains down, attorneys and accountants and other people are debit systems that go up. They're kind of just hourly professionals, a completely different philosophy of how kind of numbers work in a business. But the second part I wanted to talk to you about is that because we're labor projected versus labor actual, this is because in architecture specifically, we're a service business, which basically means we don't sell gas grills or hammers or something or other. We're a service business. We provide a service, so that's the first thing. And I think a lot of you in architecture would get that. But more importantly, we're a service business that happens over time. So that's the most important part to think about. And the reason is because those fees we talked about up here, they occur over time. Again, we don't sell gas grills or hammers, so we don't sell 100 grills and get an invoice, send an invoice and get paid dollars. We have a debit system over time. So we're a debit system that happens over time. So let's see how that would look graphically. So we do a basic chart. You have to be familiar with the phases of provided design services. Let's just draw a quickie chart. I draw this chart a lot in reference to architectural services, but essentially we'll have a schematic design phase, we'll have a design development phase, we'll have a contract document phase, a bidding negotiation phase, and then we'll have a CCA phase. And the way the curve generally works, and this is dollars, and this is time, is the curve basically starts like this. You work in schematic design, design development, contract documents, and as soon as it goes into bidding, whammo, goes way down, and then you have some sort of time for construction. That curve right here, this curve is essentially what all we're talking about today. And it's important to understand this, and I can't stress this enough. With schematic design, design development, contract documents, bidding negotiations, and CCA. And again, if you see this over time, what this doesn't show, and I purposely did not show it, is this overall schedule, 1 month? Not likely. Is it 1 year? Very much could be. Is it 5 years? Well, yeah, in some projects it could be very long. But this curve generally holds true for all of those time periods. The second thing is, while we're considering money, is it 1 staff? Is it 2 staff? Is it 4 staff? And so that depends on the amount of fee, right? And then so correspondingly, is it a $100,000 project? Is it a $1 million project of your fees, not construction, by the way? Is it a $100 million project? And those may sound fun, but they have their own set of issues. So the generic understanding is, as a business owner of an architecture company, you predict the amount of money that you spend over time. And how do you do that? Well, if we go back to the fact that we're a service industry and we serve our clients over time, we have to understand the phases of design. And I sort of mentioned that a minute ago. But you take all of these phases, and let's bring them down here. And ultimately, let's write them out. So schematic design, design development, contract documents, bidding negotiation, and CCA. And we have other videos we're putting together that talk about those in case you wanted to know more about those. But those are the foundations of how we provide our services. And so the AIA, American Institute of Architects, as well as other organizations, kind of breaks down your overall services generally to this. Schematic design, they say generally is about 15% of your dollars. This is 25%, 35%, 5%, and then 20%. We can talk about more, but that equals 100%. So basically, again, going back to this curve up top, if you're a person who understands calculus and understands curves, basically what we're saying is your fee, SD fee is 15% is right there. So SD fee is right there. DD fee is right there, which would be 25, 35% of your fees there, 5% of your fee there. And however this works, and I can talk about that in a minute, however that works, that is 20% of your fee. So those are important things to understand, because we can offer those services, and depending on the size of your project, just like we talked about, 100,000, 1 million, or 100 million, that's how long that these will take in terms of time. And there's a lot of variables to talk about. But going back and just talking about generically speaking, you have to understand that you project this. When we talk about real numbers, you project what is 15% of my fee? How does that equal amount of people? How many people do I need over a unit time? This particular exercise works really, really well in Excel. It works well graphically, which is kind of what I'm talking about generically here. But if you have a client that doesn't understand that and they want to know how you're going to bill them or something or other, you can show them a pretty straightforward graphic that talks about that. If you want to talk to them about some of the tools that we have as an industry, like I said, the AIA talks about this. Architects are not on their own. They have tools and things to rely on. So that's a pretty good thing. But ultimately, let's just, again, use this as a generic kind of graph. So we go back, we talk about time, or excuse me, we talk about fee, and then we talk about time. And let's just move it in the beginning. If you project, and this is dollars, if you project this curve like this, you are anticipating at any unit time, T1, T2, hello, T1, T2, that was pretty messy. T1, T2. But if you want to project over unit time, all sorts of things, ultimately, you're saying just graphically at time 1, we will have earned at that point all this money under this curve. And again, this is calculus, but really it's Excel. It doesn't have to get any more dramatic than that. At time 2, you will have earned this amount of money. And if you can see where I'm going, time 3, time 4, time 5. The idea is you've projected this amount of money to be earned based on the projects you have, based on fees you have coming in and all that kind of good stuff. But what would happen if, for some reason, didn't happen? It was really slow. You started out, and let's say for some reason, fees didn't come in the way you wanted or you planned. This is less of a problem in some ways. And actually, the bigger problem is, what if I have more fee than I have people for, right? At any one time under that curve, you have a delta. And at any one time under this curve, you've got a delta in, let's just say, staff or planning availability with what you have. And so anytime your curves don't align for any number of reasons, that could be a problem. We see this a lot in CCA, actually, quite frankly, where we anticipate a certain amount of effort in construction contract administration, and it ends up not happening for any number of reasons. 1, our documents weren't that great. 2, the contractor's not that great. 3, unforeseen conditions, which if that's a legit reason, you can actually usually get more fees for that for the client if you put together the right kind of idea of why it happened. But anytime there's a delta between actual versus projected, and again, these are 2 versions of that delta, you've got some work to do. You've got some work to do to rectify any one of those things. So, and imagine, and we'll get to it in a minute, but imagine that this was a really big project and this delta represented, $400,000 a month problem. You might say, oh, it's a good problem to have because I have $400,000 a month, either more fee, but really you don't think about it that way. Really, you're spending $400,000 a month on what you're getting. That is no good. And we can talk about what that means. Essentially, in a nutshell, that means that you're doing more work, using more staff, more resources than you have fee coming in for that phase or that unit of time. And now, what are you going to do to get that back on track? And I want to stress one more thing. This curve happens, going back to where the basic kind of graph. This curve happens whether it is a little project, and little projects can be anything. So let's say one staff was actually up here. At no time does it take 100% of a staff's time in this particular scenario. And let's say you're doing a CT change out at a hospital, or you're doing a small renovation in a medical office building or something or other. At no time does it take 100% of that person's time, right? The most it might take is, let's say, 75% of their time. But money is money. If all of a sudden their actual equals this, they're spending more money than you have projected. And they're spending more time, or for some reason there's a delta, even up to including them being more than just one person. All of a sudden, in the middle of CDs, they need help with another person. That's not great. So that's alarm bells and all sorts of bad things. So we have other videos on the channel about project management, cartooning sets, understanding how we put fees together, all that kind of good stuff. So check those out. But in a real general sense, that's how this curve works. And what we're going to do is we're going to go into using real numbers and understanding how, with real numbers, you can kind of see with real fees and real staff salaries and things that make a lot of sense, you can kind of see how that works. So hang in. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to take the concept we had a minute ago of schematic design, design development, contract documents, bidding and negotiation, and construction contract administration, and we're going to apply real-world numbers. Well, what are real-world numbers? There's some typical models of fees that we can kind of use that kind of happen in our industry. and then we can apply those percentages that are typically pushed out by the AIA. And again, they're variable, but by the AIA, American Institute of Architects. We can kind of also talk about staff, how much staff cost, and there's a million ways that gets worked out. So if you're in a big firm, if you're in a little firm, if you're a sole proprietor, you're in a firm with 1,000 people, the numbers move around a little bit. But what we're going to do is we're going to work through a couple scenarios. So if you're on the managing end of a project, or a lot of companies use kind of what they call a PMPA model, where the project manager is the project architect, they kind of double duty. You can sort of see how those numbers work. And there are some tips and tricks kind of how to pull it back on the rails if it goes off the rails. And that's a pretty good thing too. But let's put some real numbers to it and see what we can come up with. Okay, so labor, we're going to say projected versus actual. In this case, we're going to use some real numbers. We're going to use some real numbers. All right, so real numbers. I think it's important to understand the concept first, and then once you understand the concept, to sort of field test it with real numbers. Real numbers are where you can really figure out if is this guy just making it up, or does he kind of have a real sense of what's going on? And real numbers also force you to think about things in a real way. I can talk about curves all day, and that's great. But if you don't understand how they affect staff or projects or labor time and so on and so forth, then it's just a concept. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit this on the real number side. And let's go back to an example. The examples get a little muddy on the numbers, so try to follow along. But let's say you have a project. I'll just say it's project X, because that sounds all fancy. Project X, and Project X is a big building, but the AE team fee is, let's say the AE team fee is $200,000. For sake of argument, just so I can be clear, generally, the architect, if they're the prime position, you split that fee. And there's a lot of ways to split fees, and it depends on market sector, it depends on any number of things. And so market sector like healthcare, institutional, S&T, residential, it could be anything. It also depends on where you are in the country. So the Northeast, let's say, is different than the Southwest, is different in Florida, or the Southeast. And so splitting of fees is another science. We talk about that in another video, again, project management. So splitting of fees is pretty important. But for the sake of this argument, architecture will be 50%. So magically, that's $100,000. And let's call it MEP, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, is 50%, $100,000. We are going to focus on, we are going to focus on this part right there. All right. So architecture fee is $100,000. So let's go back. We talked about last time that we are a service industry. We don't sell gas grills or hammers. So ultimately, we split up our services in basic parameters that are usually set up by the AIA. I think I mentioned that. And again, you could change those. I don't know how they would like if I keep talking about it that way, but they have guidelines for how fees work. And historically in my career, they've been set up, as we mentioned, so schematic design, 15%. Design development, 25%. Contract documents, referred to as CDs, is 35%. Bidding and negotiation is 5%. And CCA, construction contract administration, is 20%. And if the math works right, it's 100%. So that's really good. But since now we're using real numbers instead of just percentages, what we're going to do is we're going to take those real numbers and we are going to apply them. So 15% of $100,000, you guessed it, $15,000. $25,000, $35,000, $5,000, and $20,000. I'll put the dollar sign because it looks better. All right. Now, that's great. You know, if you do schematic design, hey, I'm getting $15,000. Doing design development, $25,000. Those are really good things. But remember, we provide services over time. Services over time means that at any one time, you've either fulfilled 100% of your obligation, or you're in the middle of it at 50%, or you've just started it, or any number of things. So let's give this a unit of time. Let's make this real. $100,000 fee is a little bit more than an equipment change out, $200,000 project. So let's just say schematic design is 1 month. That's fine, 1 month. That's easy math. Design development, let's say, is 2 months. Let's say that contract documents are 4 months. Let's say the bidding negotiation, which is usually 2 months, and we can talk about calendar days versus we call it working days, but I'll just say for the sake of argument, it's 1 month. And construction contract administration. Now again, this type of projects, let's just go magically at 10 months. I don't think it would, but you never know. So the whole thing, do the math, 3, 7, 9 is 19 months. 19 months. So if you did straight line extrapolation, which we're not going to do, but if you did, you would take the 19 months, which is 1 all the way to 19, you'd have your fee, and you would just say, every month we earn the same. So 100,000 divided by 19, that's from around $5,000-ish, $5,000 per month. It's actually 5,000 and change. That would be one way to do it. Would that the world would be that easy? Fact is that we provide services over time, and our services don't stay the same. But it'd be really nice if every project just had one number that every month you just invoiced for. But that, my friends, is not what we do. So ultimately, when you go through this, you make our lovely graph again, and I'll see how specific I'm going to get on this. I'll try to drag it out a little bit more. If you work the math out, and it's not the end of the world, but if you work the math out, ultimately, what will happen is 1 month, $15,000. Yep, you made $15K that month. That was great. $25,000 over 2 months, $12,500. That's pretty snazzy. $35,000 divided by 4 is $8,500, I believe. I'm sure someone will check my math, which is good. And I'll make this a little bit more regular so I'm not making stuff up here. 15. 1 month, $5,000. That's not a problem. Pretty easy math. Now here's the fun one, and this is fun by all sorts of reasons. Oops, wrong one. All sorts of reasons. 10 months, $20,000, $2,000 a month. Again, equals the same amount of fee, $100,000, but now we've divided it by the number of months, we've aggregated it, and now let's apply this to our lovely chart. Our lovely chart. I love arrows. Arrows are fun. All right. If we were going to build this, up, let's just generically say, let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Let's go a little bit higher, and 12. Let's say 12. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and this is dollars. This is fee dollars, and of course, in this case, it's in thousands. Hello. In this case, it's in thousands. This is time. Time is a little bit more difficult to do by hand, but let's just say it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. 21, 22, 23. I think it's right here. So time, I'll say it's in months. And again, if you have Excel, so if you're an Excel person, I often talk to people, if you're an Excel person, a lot of this gets easier because you'll end up getting templates and you'll be able to put these numbers in. And if you're kind of like a B plus Excel person, kind of like high school Excel person, you can do the graph function. And it always looks pretty. Architects, we like pretty stuff. So graph functions are great. You can color it. We'll talk about that in a minute, but I very much appreciate it. So doing this by hand is fine. But ultimately, when you get better at this, or you're a project manager in your firm, you'll probably develop your own little suite of tools with Excel and maybe even other more fancy programs. But this is the way that we start. All right, so let's go through it again. Let's hit this. So Let's use some other color here. Let's use blue. All right, I like blue. So we said that in this particular, in this particular bit of work, we are 15,000 for 1 month. So let's just plot this like it was kind of old school. Let's just plot this. So 15,000 for 1 month. Month 1, 15,000 is way up here. And then actually, I'm going to go in the middle of my other thing. Let's see if I can spread this out a little bit. I think I can. Oh, yeah, look at that. That's pretty good. All right. So let's say we basically spread this out. Let me try this one more time. All right. Okay, much better. All right. So now let's say one more time. So 1 month, $15,000 is way up here. 2 months are 12,000. So month 2 and 12,000. So month 2, month 3. 4 months at 8,500. So now it's here, 2, 3, 4. 1 month at 5,000, which is this month down here, 5,000. This is bidding negotiation, kind of a very odd month in architecture. And then we have 10 months at $2,000. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If you were to graph this, and this is a very odd graph, but let's graph it just for fun. As much as it looks like it starts at the top, it really doesn't. It starts at the bottom at the 0, 0 axis. You go up, and then you kind of go like this. Oh, you kind of go like, let's try it again. Up, this, 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 and you go all the way out. In theory, at some point, you go back down to 0. So there's a few nuances to understand about this, but let me just write this down. This is 2K. This is 5K. Several months at 8.5K. 2 months at 12.5. And 1 month at $15,000. And really, that's kind of the problem. This why it doesn't exactly line up, but this is a good example. So what we want to do is we want to show how this kind of follows the curve. Or more importantly, what do we do or how there's nuances to this, let's just say. If this was a bit more in line with what we're talking about, ultimately this would be more like this, this, and then this, which is a lot more like this other one we had shown sort of up here, right? A little bit more rounded. Again, this is the hypothetical version, the conceptual version. Down here is using real numbers. But let's just leave this for the moment. So let's talk about staffing for a minute. Let's talk about staffing, and we're going to kind of move around a little bit. So if I have one staff, let's say his name is Joe. Joe is a $60,000 a year employee. Joe's been with us a little bit. $60,000 a year generally equals $30 an hour. $30 an hour is not what you bill the client. $30 an hour is what Joe takes home minus taxes and all that good stuff. So ultimately, every firm's a little different. You have to use what's called a multiplier. We will talk about that more in another video. But somewhere, let's just say generically that Joe gets billed out, or every time Joe works on the project for an hour, it's $100 an hour. Okay. All right, so let's just go through our scenario because now we have Joe, and let's just work down here. So Joe is a $60,000 a year person. He magically turned red now, which means generally he's $5,000 a month for staffing. So if Joe worked 100% of his time on Project X, he would be $5,000 a month worth of labor. Well, it's kind of an issue because we already said, whoa, we have $15,000 in schematic design. So we have to find a few more friends for Joe. You find a few more friends for Joe. And assuming they worked the same amount of, or they had the same amount of salary that Joe did, we actually have to have 3 people staffing this. So that's the first big issue that you have to realize. $15,000 3 people, okay? 3 people. I'll draw these little people. I love those people. All right. But then the second 2 months, it's 12.5. Well, 12.5 doesn't seem like a problem, except we have staff that's $5,000 a month, or $5,000 a month. So now we have Joe. We'll keep Joe on just to keep working. We got Joe's friend, Mr. Green, and Joe's friend, Mr. Blue, is still working. But wait a minute, Mr. Blue is only really going to work on that half time because we have $5,000, $5,000, and $2,500. That is 12.5 for that month. So Mr. Blue works half time. You're like, okay. Now, then we're cranking into what we called contract documents, so CDs, and we said CDs were $8,500 a month. Well, wait a minute, that's a problem again. It's a problem necessarily. It's a staffing conversation anyways. So we have Joe, and we have Mr. Green, and we have Mr. Blue, and as we mentioned before, $5,000. But wait a minute, Mr. Green is also $5,000, and I don't have that money. I only need $3,000 of Mr. Green, and I need 0 of Mr. Blue. So Mr. Blues have to work on another project, and Mr. Green has to only work 3/4 time. So somewhere else you have to find jobs for those 2 to work on, okay? That is the crux to project management, bringing staff inside the project when you need them, understanding the skills that the staff has, understanding their rates, and then understanding sort of time. And this sort of, this sort of, this sort of ballet, this sort of gymnastics, this sort of project management calisthenics happens every phase of the project. And we're getting pretty heavy on the examples, but as you can imagine, with $5,000 in bidding negotiation, it is just Joe. And then when you get to CCA, it's not even half of Joe. It's $2,000 a month. So what started out as 3 people, hot and heavy, then became 2.5 people, then became 1 3/4 people, then 1 person, and then not even half a person. So that's why I said when I was back up here and I was saying, boy, would it be the same? Would it be great if we had a project where we just had the same amount of fee every month? In this particular scenario, you'd have our friend Joe, and he's $5,000. He would just work on your project the entire time and never have to worry about it. You just have Joe on it and you're good to go. It's not the way it works. So this is important to understand for a couple other reasons. Let's get into those real quick. So you put together your project plan, and you'll have to see our video on cartooning. We have a great video on cartooning. You'll see that. We put together a project plan, and let's just go through it again, and we can get all graphy about it. But let's say this is kind of what ours looks like. It's a little skewed toward the upfront part. But remember, SD, DD, CDs, bid negotiation, and CCA. So SD, DD, CDs, bid negotiation, CCA. Let's just talk about some generic things. So this is time in months, and this is fee in thousands, because that's a great number. So we have Joe working, we have Mr. Green and Mr. Blue working. And what happens if there's a deadline in the design development phase, and we've used our fee, but they have to do more work? And then there's more fee, we've used our fee, and then they have to do more work. Well, all of a sudden, let's say they met the requirement for SD, but now we're going above the fee we had, right? We have a delta between the projected and the actual. That is not a great place to be. Let's continue this along. Let's say in contract documents we have fee. Let's say in contract documents we have fee, but again, to meet the requirements, they've taken more fee than we have over time, and now we're way over the hump. But then for some reason, and somehow, they get back to on schedule, and now they meet all these requirements going forward. So I will tell you this part right here, this whole delta part, that's the part you have to figure out, delta as in the difference. As a project manager, as someone that puts the fees together, you have to figure that out. Because what will happen is in this particular example on the iPad here, you're losing money hand over fist, which is not great. So how do you figure that out? Or how do you get back? So on a small job, and we've talked about small job, let's say the fee is one person or half of a person. Let's say they're not working on it full time. It is very difficult to make up big deltas because you don't have a lot of fee to work with. In this example, let's just talk about this iPad example. If we notice somewhere here, I'm trying to highlight this, somewhere here there's a bust, there's several things that can happen, but ultimately, you have to have a conversation with your staff and say, hey, why are we spending more time than we have planned? And there's several answers that can happen, and if you're in the architecture field long enough, you've heard them all. One could be, well, the scope is more than we thought, we should have had more fee. Okay. The other one could be, well, the owners made changes and we need to ask for additional services, and then that'll make up that delta. Maybe. The one that people don't like to talk about a lot is the staff is slow or they're untrained, or mitigating circumstances that making them not perform to the speed and efficiency of the project, which is what you base your budget on, right? You know that junior staff are junior staff, that senior staff are senior staff, and when people kind of act out of their time slot, out of their experience slot, it throws an entire project off. Imagine a 1 or 2 person project, but imagine a 100 person project. A lot of deltas. But back in this example here, somewhere in this green area, you've noticed there was a bust. Your job as the person kind of running the fee versus actual is you need to get it back here, and then you need to get it back on track. Now, here's the deal. In this particular example where I'm putting it back on track, notice that I'm not going back to the black line. I have to make up the fee that we busted all here. So the only way to do is to make up the fee that we had all there, right? So we're over the line over here. I'll say over the line. And then over here, we have to be under the line. To make up that difference, there's a delta. And again, this is calculus. You could figure out by areas under curves exactly how much this is, but those need to be equal, and you have to bring this back in place. On a large project, hundreds of millions of dollars, or at least several $1 million of fee, you'll have lots of people you have to manage. Sometimes you may need to replace staff. Maybe Joe's not cutting it. Maybe Joe's got something going on in his life. Or you do have to go back to the client and say, hey, we've added this scope, or something was different, and it's taken our staff a lot longer. We need to ask more fee. Hard conversation to have, but it's a very mature conversation you have to have. But managing that curve, managing fee actual or fee projected versus fee actual is super important, because ultimately you have to keep the lights on. And that's what you have to do, is manage fee. It's great when everybody comes to work and makes money, but you have to have enough money coming in to pay everybody. Otherwise, you'll have a very short-lived either profession in the career or a very short-lived office.
Hey all, when we were post-producing this video, we saw that the video started getting really long. And so we said there's a natural break right after we have this section about using real numbers to describe the projections versus actual in the most important curve in architecture. Video 2 is really worthwhile. It stacks mock projects on top of each other in an overall office environment, and it kind of tells you where the peaks and valleys are, how to smooth those things out. It's a really, really worthwhile video. It's only a few minutes long, but it makes sense to check it out. It puts a cap on kind of all the stuff we talked about in part 1. So take a check out of the video. Tell me what you think about it. Like, comment, and subscribe. And we'll take a look at the comments. I appreciate you tuning in, and we'll talk to you in the next video. Bye.